So being able to operate in an environment of unknowns is just the new normal. And then you compound that with the impact of social media and how much we know about the various disruptions in the world, political, economic, and so on. Then you just have to keep on keeping on.
Welcome back to Systems with Laura, the podcast where we explore the systems, strategies, and stories behind businesses that run with purpose and clarity. This episode of Systems with Laura is brought to you by Proprium, business workflow and automation agency. If you're building a service-based business and you're overwhelmed by operations, automations, or choosing the right tools, this is exactly what Proprium helps with. Proprium builds systems that help you save time, reduce repetitive work, and scale without chaos. Learn more at proprium.agency. Today's episode is an especially meaningful one for me because I'm joined by someone who's not only an incredible professional, but someone who has personally shaped my own journey, both in business and beyond. Theresa Kane is more than a guest. She's a mentor, a thought partner, and a trusted guide who has brought depth, calm, and brilliance into every room she enters. Her work has transformed how organizations, especially in the nonprofit space, think, grow, and adapt to change. She's the president of Piper and Company, a Toronto-based consulting firm that specializes in strategic planning, organizational development, and amalgamations in the not-for-profit sector. With plenty of experience and a sharp, human-centered approach, Theresa helps organizations align their mission with action in a way that is both practical and powerful. I can't tell you how much it means to have her here. This conversation is one I've been waiting to share with all of you. So welcome, Theresa, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
This is very, very weird for me, and I am sure for you because we have normal conversations almost weekly sometimes for years. So this is gonna be a very fun episode, and I'm so happy that I can share you with the world and everything that you also taught me, and basically that people can learn more about what you do because I think it's very, very interesting and fascinating.
Thank you. It's weird to speak to you as formally as we're speaking today, but we will get through it.
I think we're gonna have fun also. So I've had the honor of calling you a mentor for years, but for those just meeting you today, how did you begin this journey into consulting and what inspired you to focus on the nonprofits?
So I think I actually began the journey not necessarily into consulting, but into self-employment with the decision to go to business school. I've always known that I was someone that wanted to be self-employed. In business school, I discovered that I am someone that is happier in a change management role, in a project-based environment, and that tends to lend itself very well to consulting. So it wasn't, it was more a series of decisions rather than a big realization. The reason I focus on the not-for-profit world, or I really call it in Canada is the association world, is I am personally more interested in what industries as a whole are doing or professions as a whole are doing rather than any one application in any one company. So consulting lends itself well to that kind of approach, and the association world lends itself well to a big picture kind of focus.
You've been working virtually long before it became the norm, and I remember the stories that you told me. And there is one story where you were on your laptop during your son's practice working from the car, which at the time, and I'm not allowed to say the year, felt almost futuristic. So can you talk a little bit about how you started working remotely so early on, and what made you embrace that model? Because from everything I know about you, it really feels like you kind of anticipated the trends and you made your own decisions. You didn't stay in this is how you should do things. You basically modeled your work towards your needs and your family's needs.
Oh, for sure. I'm never fond of "this is how you should do things" as a phrase in general. I think I'm probably a bit of a rebel that way. I mean, the decision to work remotely is really, I was very keen and still am keen on having interesting work that's challenging, that helps clients while also maintaining balance. It has always been my theme. When my kids were young, they played sports a lot, and it was a big part of our family life. And by being self-employed, I could, and working the ability to work remotely, then I could take client meetings everywhere and anywhere. They both were, my sons were both big baseball players, so we played a lot of tournaments out of, actually a lot of them in the US as well as other points in Canada. So I could easily take a client meeting from any location. That, though, I have to say, the pandemic made a big change in that area, because instead of just being a telephone meeting, um, Zoom exploded, and what became a rare thing to do became a common thing to do, and that has fundamentally changed how I work, because I can work on many more different client files in a day, because the whole thought of driving somewhere has disappeared. Um, when I started working remotely, and I so there's two pieces to that: is working remotely and having a home-based office. I didn't tell people. Telling people you had a home-based office was seen as a negative, or I perceived that it was seen as a negative. I perceived it as something that was seen as limiting my capabilities, and I didn't want that to be the case. As I got to know clients, I started mentioning it if it came up, and most people were generally jealous but a bit confused, and couldn't figure out how I could make it work. And now uh, it people are surprised when you have to go into an office. So technology has really been our friend in that area, and technology supported by a philosophical decision that is really central to who I am, which is work-life balance. That was a big rambling answer, Laura. Sorry about that.
I love when you do those. They're not just rambling; they're packed with wisdom, because you gave a really good comparison of how things turned, and I do feel that that whole season of your work, I would even call it, was probably packed with people questioning your freelancing and how you run your business. And did you have any doubts from friends and family and situations like that? And how did you cope with them?
Uh, Not from the working from home and self-employed. I mean, neither of my parents worked in business, so they never had a lot of feedback or input into various business decisions I made. Uh, so friends, I mean, over the years, I have other friends. I do have a circle of friends who've done similar things in different fields, so that helped. Um, I had other friends who told me I needed to get a real job at one point. Okay, uh, I honestly, I didn't pay a lot of attention. It's a central value of mine. So I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what kind of work I wanted. Um, I I know that I'm most comfortable with work that has a lot of that combines a good understanding of the problem with theory and leaving people with practical solutions. So I could still do which is all centered around the human pieces and client relations. I knew I could do that piece in any format. And then um, it didn't you know, so people ask the question before they are a client. And for some people, they do want a large organization behind them, and that makes sense depending on the scope of the problem they're looking at. Once people work with me, I don't think it's just not something on their mind. They want to work with me for whatever perceived skill set that I have and how that matches with whatever problem they have.
I feel that was a thing like 10 years ago, maybe, because now it's much more common to be an entrepreneur. I remember even when I was starting out in 2018, it was still not that common that you have people around you that are self-employed. It was more common to have a job, basically. And now you have a blend of people that decide on how they're gonna basically spend their career, or they mix things. They have a job and they have a
Yeah.
freelancing hustle on the side. What are your thoughts on that?
So I mean, I had two schools of influence there. One was because I was a member of ISEC, the International Association of Students in Economics and Commerce, which is the link through which you and I met. There's a lot of folks in ISEC who've gone on to do entrepreneurial things, and because we had big jobs very young, we all had a lot of confidence in our abilities to define problems and solve them. And there's many ISEC success stories at an entrepreneurial level. Um, um, and then in business, and also the independent streak, I think partly came from ISEC, or is why ISEC was a good fit for me. At business school, there were folks who there weren't a lot straight out of business school that chose an entrepreneurial route, but there's many who have since, who chose a corporate career, accomplished big things, and then either bought businesses or founded businesses, or went out and did things far larger in scope than what I've done through venture capital funding. So I did have those two schools. So in my immediate circle, there were a number of people that have done entrepreneurial things.
So I think I can say that we are both very proud to be ISEC alumni, and
Yes,
shout out to
yes,
ISEC. Definitely, because it also connected us. I do feel that multicultural, international approach, and how you basically spend your time throughout the years in ISEC and how it's structured, I think it impacted my decision. I also wanted to be an entrepreneur just like you, from since I can remember. And that just gave me the, I think, ability to trust myself more and just do it immediately after university. So I definitely recommend to anybody, ISEC especially, but any of those student organizations that can help people realize at an earlier age what their superpower is, what their
yeah,
traits are, what their characteristics are, definitely there. And I also know that before this company, you had a marketing agency. So I'm wondering, you experienced leading a team, you had an agency style type of work and model. So how is this different from your consulting firm, and how is the experience different as a founder and as the CEO?
great question. I would say so. I had a marketing communications company, or a design studio, that I founded with a partner. Um, and that was after business school. To start becoming self-employed, I did copywriting. I'm a fairly good writer, so that was something that fell into my lap. The writing got me exposed to clients that wanted more, that wanted the design piece, and I partnered with a graphic designer. Together, we set up the company. We hired staff, and not through any big strategic thought on our behalf, but we did start getting association clients. So to answer the first part of that question, how is it different with staff? My role was business development and doing the initial consulting and strategy piece that enabled us to do great work for clients. What I discovered is the design piece was the design. I like the design piece and I like the design world. But what I was always torn between doing the work, so getting the work and doing the work, and getting the work and passing it off. And I found that I got to go deeper into clients' problems by morphing the design studio into consulting. I was doing consulting anyway, but it wasn't the lead, and I wanted it to be the lead. Um, as far as what is the difference, I mean, there's so many differences. When you have staff, you have to have systems. And I wouldn't describe myself as someone who has a ton of systems now, but you have to have systems. You have to have a hierarchy. You have to have a collaborative environment. You have to communicate values to staff as a whole. These were always small staff teams, so you have to do the things that enable the staff to get along and to work together, pulling in one direction with a client. You add the HR piece to your existence as the business owner. You've got to be prepared to hire and coach and fire if necessary. So that is actually fairly time consuming. So that was some of the differences. The work itself, the process to do the work was not all that different. The end product was different. In the design studio, it was marketing communications work, and now it is advice in some form to solve a problem. But the client base is fairly similar. I'm not sure if I answered that question.
You have, and I honestly feel the way you described running an agency as even a recipe, basically, because I don't feel that it's that commonly explained to that level of how you need to communicate with people and how much mental load that is, in addition to running a business, client acquisition, client retention, and everything else that you actually need to do, and how that weighs on your schedule, on everything that you do related to that. So I think that it's also very important for people to understand that being an entrepreneur is not just this is what an entrepreneur does, but how the business model is made. It also dictates how you're going to spend your day, your week, your month, and what are your obligations, basically.
For sure. In a that made me think of another thing. In a design studio too, where I was the bridge between the corporate client and the design staff. The, the the key to success there, I thought, was knowing how much to brief a designer, how directive to be with the creative people so that they understood the client problem, but then they were set free to apply their very creative minds to it. Um, you can't be so directive that you stymie that staff and you restrict them, but you also can't be so free and open that it doesn't solve the briefing that you've developed with the client. So it's an interesting mix of hard business skills, listening skills, and setting people free. And that's a constant balance in that particular environment.
It can also be even called an art, because if you push too hard, you're gonna create issues. If you don't give enough directive, then they're not gonna know what to do. So it takes, I think, nuance, years of experience, projects behind your belt to get that timing, that in the communication, that's right enough. How did you learn that? Business school can't teach you that. So how did you figure that out?
Um, I mean, you have to. I think business school did teach me that to some extent, because in business school, the particular school I went to was it was all case study. So case studies are about develop. You get a problem, you get a 30-page description of a problem, and you have to figure out how to solve it. So when you come into case discussion, and there's 60 people in every classroom, you come into a case discussion ready to talk about it. And I used at the beginning used to think, oh, I have this case solved, and I would go into a room with 59 other people and I would hear all kinds of other angles on it. So it was an iterative process where you come up with one solution and somebody else says something, and then you tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. So that applied in the design school environment. I got a lot of respect. My style shifted from a right or wrong answer to the best answer, and you get the best answer through a lot of talk. I came to develop a lot more respect for drafts. And you get something down on paper, you look at it, you fix it, you adapt it, and then that gets another idea and another idea. Um, and through that process, if I compare how people in business school think, the bend to analytical thinking, which is a real strength of business school, and how creative people think, there's a to get those two types of brains, to make it to simplify it, those two types of brains go have trouble speaking to each other sometimes, but together those two types of brains can come up with really good solutions. So to answer your question, when did I develop that skill? I'm good at being the bridge between different types of brains. I'm good at summarizing what people are saying. I'm good at understanding the implications and asking them what the implications are, and um, and helping each side understand each other. Yeah, that's and I mean, I like design, so that helped. Like I like playing with colors. I like looking at fonts. I like having the, love designers would be so much better at that than I was, but I loved watching their and giving feedback on their output. It's a fun business environment.
I also would add that to me, it sounds that you see patterns in the business, in the
Yes.
behavior, and then you put that all together, and you create something and everybody gets on the same page, basically, if I'm
Yes.
correct.
When people are in the middle of a problem, either problem or an opportunity, it is, and it's the same thing for me. When I'm in the middle of a problem or opportunity, it's really difficult to see the patterns. It's difficult to see, to relate to other people, that to pull experience from other people or other organizations. It's difficult to figure out the difference between your own opinion on this issue and how to figure out a path forward. Um, and it's I, and a problem when it's very weighty, or when an opportunity is too broad, or very broad, it's difficult to figure out what is the next step. And I am good at helping people not necessarily create systems in the sense that you do, Laura, but systems in the way to approach a problem, and figure out the way to do it. That is something that I enjoy doing. It's like the glue in the middle kind of thing.
If today's episode makes you realize your tools are not supporting your business, Proprium builds systems in tools like Airtable, SmartSuite, ClickUp, HubSpot, Make, Zapier, and many more. Proprium's team maps your processes, builds your workflows, automates your tasks, and trains your team. If you want systems done properly, visit proprium.agency. So I think that ties very well with the strategic planning that you do. I think that your work is incredibly detailed, human-centered, just like we discussed now, how you basically can combine people's personalities and help them work together. So I'm wondering, how do you approach helping a team or a board clarify its direction without overwhelming them?
Uh, I mean, I give my approach. So I believe that strategic planning exists in the minds of the participants. They just don't necessarily think of it in terms of strategic planning. So with strategic plans, and especially in the not-for-profit environment, um, I'm I get a lot of input. I get a lot of input external to the organization through an environmental scan. I get input from senior staff. I get input from volunteers and directors. And I tend to always ask the same questions. And the questions are along the variety of, what's going on, what's working, what's not working, what's changing your environment. What do you think needs to happen as a result of that change? What resources do you need to make that happen relative to other things you're dealing with? Is this a big problem, a little problem? The questions are better than that, but that is the essence. And in doing a lot of interviews, the options tend to rise to the surface. I also do a couple of things to speed that along. I really pay attention to people's words, so that when I am writing the summary of the input I've got, I often literally quote people. And the reason I quote people is if they hear themselves in the finished document, they understand that they've contributed, and then they're much more willing to refine it, to go from a big range of options to an actual plan, because they've heard themselves in it. They feel that their views have been represented. So it's not unlike working in a design studio. It's getting input, presenting it, reflecting back on it, refining it, getting input again. I am also, by nature, I am a pragmatist. So my bias is always to leave people not with a theoretical understanding of what's going on, but given this theory, given this understanding of what's going on, what do we do about it? Organizations and people can get stuck in perpetual analysis and not take action. And it's important, any organization to stay fresh has got to move forward, and that comes from taking action, well thought through action, well reasoned action, but still action.
So if we can simplify it, and let's say that you start working with an organization, they are feeling stuck, they're misaligned. Where do you actually begin? What are the signs that you look for when you're doing an organizational review, for example?
An organizational review, the number one sign is conflict. That the organization is frustrated, they're not accomplishing their goals. In the association world, the board of directors can feel that staff are not working hard enough, and staff can feel that either the CEO doesn't support them, or the board doesn't, or that leadership doesn't know what they are doing. So the lack of and that's usually though, and when that situation occurs, it can feel deeply personal to people. They can feel that, so and so is not doing it, and we would be fine if it were not for Billy or Bob or Jane or Sue or whomever. But the truth is, it's usually patterns, and the pattern is often that the organization, in some ways, is not correctly resourced for what they want to do. So there's been change of some type, an external change, an internal change, an opportunity change, a new program, a membership change, whatever that change is. And as a result of that change or series of changes, the organization has not kept pace. So perhaps they don't have the right investment in systems, in computer systems and software, or perhaps they don't have the right marketing approach, or they don't have the right programs and services anymore, or the government's requests of them can't be met. And if we fix the systems and fix the reporting structure and fix the job descriptions to reflect what the organization needs to do now, that usually takes care of the conflict, or a good part of the conflict.
That ties into the scarcity of resources nonprofits operate in, depending on the type of nonprofits and all of the criteria that they have, basically. But I would say that nonprofits often operate in changing resource constrained environments. How do you help teams when they need to build the strategic plans that are both ambitious and adaptable? So the dreams versus reality and the situation, how do you get them all to match?
Uh, that is a tendency of not-for-profits. You're absolutely right. Their dreams tend to outpace their money. Uh, so, I mean, there's two choices there. You either get more money, is one change, and with professional associations and industry associations, that can be difficult to do because their main revenue source is member dues. Um, with the charity sector, that is increased fundraising. Now, fundraising is not something I personally touch as a consultant. There's other folks who are far better at fundraising than I am. But those are the choices. You either get more money, or you change your focus to match your resources, and then that becomes a question of not what you've got to shift the question of what can we do to what should we do, given an environment where there's 10 possible approaches here, 10 possible stakeholder groups that we can respond to. What is the old 80-20 rule? What is the 20% of activity that's going to keep 80% of people satisfied and 80% of our issues resolved? That can be tough, because volunteers, directors are highly motivated. They want to make a big change. So it's setting the right order of priority, so it's not a no to everything, but it's a not yet. That can be tough work.
So it would be, I would say, ideal to create your strategy when you're not in conflict yet and when there's no scarcity in resources. But I would assume that you usually enter those situations where it's mid-plan, where it's mid-year, where it's not perfect beginning, perfect end, school book example of a situation. So how do you kind of cope with those situations? When is it time for them to pause and reframe goals, for example, without losing any momentum in those situations?
Well, I'm going to get rid of the without losing momentum, because I would argue that you have to lose a bit of momentum to clarify your plan. I mean, I always get people hire consultants when there is an issue. They don't, the associations where there's nothing external happening, and nothing that has been a big shift, then they tend to approach their plans differently. By definition, consultants are called in when there's a change of some kind. Sometimes that change is a problem, sometimes it's an opportunity. I mean, any consultant, you have to start with a briefing. So if you want to minimize the disruption in momentum, you have to understand exactly where people are starting from and what their goals are. If they have common goals, great. Then you get to skip to the how do we implement, how do we achieve those goals. In most situations, goals are not common, so you've got to negotiate common goals. Or if you need to move forward on more than one goal, or on the many goals people have, then the question becomes, how do we resource this? So it could be that people do need A, B, and C. So if we need goal A, B, and C, then you need to have the right staff resources and money to achieve that. So it's always a question of trade-offs. If we do this, then we have to do that. Or if we do all of A, B, and C, then we need more of. Yeah, I would argue, the other big philosophical piece I would argue is, given the times we are in, organizations are always in a crisis. I mean, I think a crisis is the new normal. Partly we know a lot more, and some of the crises are very legitimate. Some of the crises are a feeling that we are in a crisis because there's many issues around us that are in a crisis. There's a lot of input to everyone every day about things not being quite uh, stable. So their big hope when they start working with me is that all of that goes away. And I think we can introduce calm into an organization despite that. But the external pieces and the impact of those that we're all feeling, I don't believe that that's going away in the foreseeable future. If I would probably argue, it's, given the speed of change, it's the new normal.
It sounds to me like you help them put things under control that can be put under
Yes.
control, and accept those things that can't be controlled, and learn how to kind of swim in that chaos in a way, if that makes sense.
I mean, that's so interesting. You should say that. When I've been in times of personal crisis in my life, I've done what everyone's done. I've panicked, and I've been stressed, and I've been upset. But I do ultimately get myself to what are the pieces in my control, and what can I do about it, and try and let go of the rest, and then ask myself that question on a repeated basis, because the things that you can change and that you can control change depending on what else you've previously controlled. So, uh, and I'm pretty good at the other question I ask myself before I finish my first sentence. The other question I ask myself is, can I live with this? And if so, how do I live with it? And if I can't live with it, what do I do about it? And if then that answer is, I can actually do something about it, or I can accept. Um, and that's a nice little decision tree that I take myself to regularly.
What do you do when you work with people who don't have that reasoning? So, for example, when you have to make sure that leadership teams who are resistant to change change and adapt, because the data shows something needs to be changed, but maybe they don't want, or are not ready, or didn't ask themselves those questions that you just said. How do you approach?
Uh, so generally, good question. And there's always, in any group, there's always a range of people who want instant change, who want gradual change, who want focused change, or who want no change. So I the there's a let's so the no change people, I try and understand. There's some people who, no matter what, don't want change. And if it is a no matter what, don't want change, I don't tend to spend a lot of time on them. The middle group that is open to change but wants to clarify or quantify that change, they can be really influential, because they have, if you work with them well, they have the ability to become champions of change and move to the to the tier that is moving forward. Or if they don't like the rate of change, or the nature of the change, they can become no people. So working with that middle, which is generally the majority, can be really influential. And I'm going to come back to them in a sec. And then the top group, the group that wants instant change, it's usually a question of um, slowing them down, helping them understand that other people in the organization just want more information, and that we need to satisfy the middle group that is going to include um, people who are afraid of the future, want more data, want a more holistic approach, want a more creative approach, want a more analytical approach. So communicating them to them in the style that makes them comfortable with the change. And always, I think I haven't said this in a little bit, so it's important to say, change comes from within. Effective change in an organization is mining what the organization already knows, combining it with what I may learn about their external environment, and coming up with a path forward that keeps the majority of people moving forward. Now, if the person is reluctant to change as the CEO, and the board of directors want to see change, that's a whole other kind of problem. So if the board of directors want to see change, usually they need assistance in quantifying and qualifying what that change needs to be and defining what success looks like. And then that needs to be negotiated with the CEO so that the CEO understands the board's perspective and feels that they have the support to implement the change.
I think that ties into a lot of different issues that can come after that situation, but it shows the root cause, and it's usually people reluctance to change, being used to certain systems, not just even software or processes, but also ways of thinking and their
Yes.
routine. So I'm also thinking that one other aspect of it can be that nonprofits struggle with short-term thinking because of funding cycles. They're very dependent on those. So how do you help them build strategies that are future-focused, taking into account the cycles, but also all the issues we discussed here? So you're balancing a lot of things in the air when you're doing your work, actually. So how do you make sure that the strategy is still future focused, takes into consideration the funding cycle and the real situation of the nature of the situation?
I mean, not-for-profits definitely have the constraint of the funding cycle, which with professional and industry association is often member dues. Many successful associations, though, are supplementing member dues with non-dues revenues, with either education they sell in other jurisdictions or professional development or benefits or that kind of role. So that helps. The staff leadership is the link there. So staff leadership lasts longer than the term of any one board of directors, and their role really is to, as the boards change and as boards come in, to say, here's what we've done so far, here's where we're at now, and here's what the future looks like. Staff leadership is absolutely key in that, so that they have I think of the board of directors as, they are the ship that's sailing, or the yacht that's sailing down the Mediterranean, but the CEO is the rudder. So that is one constraint to that. I mean, I think the short-term thinking versus long-term thinking is not just an association constraint. It tends to be a constraint in our society and in our organizations in general. If you look at a lot of the big problems that we are facing, climate change, sustainability, the tariff discussions that are taking place in the world, those are problems that are not going to be solved in the short term. So we have to meet short-term needs while putting in place the things that will address long-term issues. So a lot of that is if you take a long-term issue, let's take sustainability. If you take a long-term issue like sustainability, it's first having a good understanding of the scale and scope of that, the arc of change for that particular client and how that might look, and then slicing off the piece that can be done now, so that there's progress moving forward, but progress moving forward while still meeting short-term needs. So, one of the expressions change, people would like change to be linear, and it isn't. Change is never ever linear. Change is in a good, or in an organization, I shouldn't say good, an organization where things are going well, change is 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Where things are off the rail, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. But what we lose sight of, I think we tend to focus on all the things that aren't working well, but we do have the 1 or 2 steps of progress, and you need to build on those successes. And you need to remind people, if you think of an association environment, let's take an association where there's a lot of conflict. You've got directors that are saying this isn't getting done. You have staff that can say, the directors are always yelling at us, and a CEO that can feel stuck in the middle. But the truth is, the organization needs to be reminded of its own progress and what has actually been achieved, because even in high conflict environment, things are still being done. Services are still being provided. Lobbying is still taking place. So there is forward progress. It just doesn't necessarily feel that way.
I think that also shows that human effort being acknowledged is very crucial, just like you mentioned when you put quotes in the report where you acknowledge people. So even when it's a crisis or when it's going really in a chaotic way, It's very important to acknowledge individuals, to show people that effort is appreciated. I think that takes everything much more smoother and goes a long way with collaboration.
For sure, for sure. And the difference between conflict and collaboration is sometimes just the length of the conversation.
I love that. We're gonna use that as a quote for sure. I love when you drop nuggets of wisdom like that, because I have a full notebook of your quotes,
Oh
honestly.
my
So
goodness.
yeah.
I probably hear some of them go, I said that? I said that?
Yes. But good thing that we record our calls anyway on Zoom, so I can always prove it to you that you did
Excellent.
speak. So that's good. So in general, kind of to wrap up that topic, I would love to hear from you. What are some common mistakes you think organizations make in their strategic planning process, and how can they avoid them?
Uh, I think there's two extremes. I think the first one is letting the past govern too much of what you do in the future, relying too much on precedent and not taking into account the changes in the external environment, their stakeholder environment, and their membership. I think that's one extreme. I think the other extreme is essentially what we've been talking about, is trying to do too much, being fueled by passion. Passion is excellent, but passion that isn't directed can be a challenge. So I think those are the two extremes. In one case, the case of the first, which is being stuck in your ways and too reliant on precedent, my job becomes to explain the extent to which the environment has changed, and if they stay on the current trajectory, what will happen or what could happen, and how that leads to a lack of relevancy. And on the passionate, the wanting to do too much, that usually people can be taken through that, and can together come up with priorities. That usually can go away. That can get managed fairly quickly, and priorities. All of this, like it comes from me asking the group what they want, and then reflecting back to the group, and then that becomes something they can comment on. I heard a consultant, like I think in my first year of my career, in the organization I was working at, was doing an organizational review, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. I know he's based in Vancouver, but his line that I have quoted since, people plan the battle, they don't battle the plan, and that's key. That's absolutely key. People have got to hear themselves. They have to contribute. They have to be part of the negotiated solution.
So
What was that gentleman's name? I'm completely blank.
I think you will remember after the recording of the show.
I actually, his name hasn't been top of mind for me for years, so I might not, but I'll try.
I love the quote. I think it shows very succinctly what the whole point
Yeah.
is of the situation. So I'm wondering, you're a consultant for a long time. Again, I'm not allowed to say number of years. I was instructed not to use that
No,
before
you
the
can use the number of years. It was a phrase many decades. It seemed very long. So I had the design studio for about 15 years, and then I morphed from that into consulting. So I've now been doing what I do now for about 20. So it's a long time for sure.
Well, then many decades is really bad. We can say 20 years.
Okay, I like that. 20 years is good.
Good, because I don't usually check all of the questions. I knew that I needed to check that point before the show.
That's
But
funny.
yeah, definitely. So I'm wondering now, you've seen so many consultants, you worked with them, you are a consultant. I remember when I met you, basically I was on your lecture about how to become a consultant. So that's
Yes.
how this whole thing started. And you gave us this quiz, and I was shocked at my number. I think it was like 97 out of 100, and I felt like I rigged it in a way, because it was so weird that it's so high. And the way we collaborated over the years, I think that we're very much alike. So what are the things that you kind of see as traits a consultant needs to have, and what would you kind of, how would you define a consultant? Because people also misunderstand the role of a consultant and the importance.
So a lot of people call themselves consultants. So and sometimes when people are looking for their next career opportunity, they'll refer to themselves as consultants, and that's a great way to get a good career opportunity. But the kind of I am a career consultant, so I see myself as someone who is a change agent. And sometimes that change, I'm brought in as a change agent because a client just simply knows what they need to do. And I come in and they just simply don't have the manpower to do it, or they lack an external expertise. That's one mode of consulting. I don't do a lot of that tactical consulting anymore. The next is they I am the questioner and the facilitator that helps an organization realize their own answer, and that's usually a strategic planning process. And then the other version that we've talked a little bit more about today is the organizational review, which is an organization is really has a long history, has had success, but for whatever reason, they are at a crossroads that they're often feeling in terms of conflict. So I'm a change agent is what I am, depending on any one of those applications. I'm the person that brings a pattern to environments that are usually in a state that they can't see their own patterns, and none of us can see our own patterns when we are in a crisis. It's just human nature.
For sure. And I think that's why feedback in organizations and collaboration and honest communication, transparency is very important, because when you are your own boss, who is there to give you feedback other than coaches, mentors, other
Yeah.
colleagues, basically? So it's really crucial, I think, to surround yourself with people like that. And I
Yeah.
have,
Can
uh,
I one little thing I thought of that we haven't talked a lot about? Um, one of my roles indirectly, I really believe in staff leadership, and a good CEO that is strong, that has the ability to bring the board along and get the integrate the external environment, get the most out of staff, get the right people in place doing the right things. Staff leadership is everything. It makes all the difference in amongst my clients. So I've had the pleasure of working with lots and lots of strong CEOs who, when they work with me, are not necessarily in a crisis, but sometimes they're looking for that neutral voice, that can bring the organization along, that can assess all parts of the organization and support them, or give them feedback on what they can do to enhance their own level of supports. I don't want to miss the staff leadership piece. It's critical.
I think that leadership development in it being embedded into day to day in a way is also very important. I would call it that in a way, because if staff is empowered to have a voice and give feedback to leadership, then the organization is very healthy. If you're afraid of your boss, if you're afraid of communication, and if you say something, then the workplace is going to kind of punish you in a way, the organizational culture is not healthy. I think that creates a lot of conflict and a lot of resentment that can sink a company, even if it has amazing processes, systems, product, service, whatever. I think that's what kind of kills companies the most, other than the founder's limitation to guide, or basically to learn and to evolve, so the company can grow.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, you want employees that you hire them for expertise. You want them to feel that they can share that expertise for sure.
And I have one final question for you.
Okay.
So this is more of imagination. I'm wondering if you could redesign how the nonprofit sector approaches leadership development, exactly
Ah,
what we were talking about. What would you change? So you had a magic wand and you can make everything work better.
oh, what a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I mean, I wouldn't have for the whole not-for-profit sector or the whole association sector. There's some organizations I've seen that should approach or might want to consider approaching leadership development differently. Uh, um, so I I think probably the one generalization that I can give is I think people are often tempted to, or because of the day-to-day demands of their job, tend to work in silos, and cross-pollinating ideas across organizations is really important. So that would be one indirect tool of leadership development that I think is really important. And in Canada, where I'm based, there is a very good association. It's Canadian Society of Association Executives, that is an association of associations, which is one safe space where CEOs and senior staff leaders can do that kind of work. Um, I think the other piece of leadership development is related to a question that we discussed a little while ago, which is the time frame with which we evaluate success. So, if we want leaders to develop, we need to give them enough runway to have a chance to assess situations, implement solutions, watch some solutions fail, and continue to correct. So, impatience is the enemy of leadership development. And I would also argue it's the enemy of associations. There's there's also some folks that you come across every once in a while who are fantastic leaders that never did anything that resembles former leadership development. There's some people who are just born for the role. I'm picturing a few faces, some of them from ISEC, actually, a few people who are just natural at figuring out what's going on, figuring out a path, cajoling others, getting their influence and getting the best out of the people around them. There's some that play that game like professional athletes play their sport, and I don't mean to use game in a derogatory sense, but just balance all of those things in the same way that athletes do things. They just seem to do it seamlessly. It's wonderful to watch people like that.
I love how you described it, and I love how you put that into examples. And I think that this whole episode is really, really something that listeners are going to learn a lot from.
I hope
So
so.
I want to thank you for being my guest. I really, really appreciate it a lot. Thank you so much for everything you shared today. Thank you for everything you've modeled over the years. I promise to keep bugging you still, and that we continue our mentorship, definitely. And I will try to listen more. I don't take every advice, so I know it can be sometimes frustrating, but thank you for putting up with me throughout this whole time.
I think you're giving me far too much credit. I think you're one of those natural born leaders, and there's very little I've done other than give you a place to discuss some issues and opportunities as they've come up. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate what you said. Thank you so much. To everyone listening, I hope this conversation gave you the same sense of grounding and inspiration that I've been so lucky to experience with Theresa in my corner. So if you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone navigating change in their organization or career. And as always, build with intention, lead with clarity, and trust the systems that support you. See you in the next one. If you enjoy conversations like this, you'll love the Proprium Digital Network. It's a community where digital service founders get tools, templates, weekly insights, and behind the scenes guidance on building systems the right way. If you want to stop building systems alone and start building with support, join us at proprium.agency.